Listen, we've all heard leaders say, start with why. But what if the real foundation of leadership isn't why? What if it's who? Well, today on Transformation Station, we're unpacking why the most effective leaders don't begin with purpose alone. Let's get this conversation started. Welcome to Transformation Station Leadership Podcast, where leaders grow with clarity, resilience, and purpose. I'm your host, Adrienne Benton, and today's episode challenges a common leadership belief and invites us to go deeper. Because before you and I, as leaders, can fully live out our purpose, we must understand who we are, our identity, our values, and the foundation that shapes every decision we make. I'm so excited about this episode. We have an amazing guest who is joining us today. And he's not amazing just because he's amazing. He's going to help us today to learn how to anchor our leadership. But before you meet him, I want to just remind you, Transformation Station Leadership Community, we meet twice a week, Monday and Wednesday. So make sure you so that you don't miss one episode of all this leadership goodness. Also want to remind you that we have a virtual event coming up. Now, in January, we had the first Lead Her Shift conference. Over 400 of you registered. It was amazing, this virtual conference. Well, number 2 is coming. We're going to have the Lead Her Shift virtual adjustment. And the focus of this one is to remind us mistakes are going to happen. When they happen, that's not an indication that you have to stop. It's an indication that you may just need to adjust. So March 13th has already come and gone. If you have not registered, you need to go ahead and go to mobilizingwithimpact.com now and yourself. Make sure that you invite another woman in your conference. All right. Well, listen, it is time. That's right. It is time for us to move forward into our conversation today. Let me tell you about our guest. Our guest, his name is David. David Ask is an entrepreneur, an inventor, and identity coach. From bringing his invention to over 3,700 retail stores to coaching high-performing leaders through identity first transformation, David Ask helps people discover who they are before chasing what they do. His mission? To build grit, awaken purpose, and reveal the hidden riches inside everyone. And listen, he can sing like Bocelli. I can't wait for you to meet him. Let's do it right now. David, welcome to Transformation Station Leadership Podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, and I just absolutely love just your whole vibe. This is great. I'm kind of fired up right now after listening to your intro.
Well, I'm fired up and ready to get this conversation started. So let's do just that. As I was thinking about and preparing for this episode, I was thinking to myself that personally, as a leader, I have learned through the years that leadership becomes more effective when it flows from identity rather than obligation, right? When I know who I am, then my decisions become clearer, my communication becomes stronger, my influence becomes more consistent. So I want to start off with this question. As we look at the work that you do, right? What does the phrase never start with why, start with who? What does that mean? And tell us from your experience, why is identity such a foundational starting point for leadership?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Thanks for teeing that up. Obviously this idea of never starting with why. I remember reading Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why, years
Yes.
ago. It's fabulous, by the way. So I'm not taking a dig there really. I think what's kind of fascinating is that quite often we have a sense of why we want to do something. People always use the phrase our why. You got to have a why. I agree. And it kind of depends on who you're with, and because your why is different depending on who's in front of you and that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's fascinating is if you haven't done a little bit of deep work. You haven't tried to understand what's under the hood and how was I fashioned?
Mhm.
I didn't make me, right? So there's a bit of humility that starts just with this idea that I am a created being, and I
Mhm.
have to. It's a popular one here, and it makes sense with you and me. I didn't choose my skin color, right? Well,
Mhm.
that's an easy one. Well, I didn't choose my eye color or my taste buds or when I was born or which family I was born and my DNA and my fingerprint and my retina. But here's what's fascinating is the I'm kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool real quickly here. But so when children are growing up, they're not thinking about authenticity and identity and all the mission and purpose and why and all this kind of thing. They're just acting natural. They're just acting normal. They're acting genuine. They're acting authentically. They're doing what comes very very just from their core, right? It's who they are. They're just doing their deal. And we as adults start to play all these head games and start questioning everything. And part of that's very appropriate and normal, by the way. But I think it's really important to understand that we are a created, fashioned being, and
Mhm.
I believe we're made in the image of God, and
Mhm.
He made us fantastic. So when you start to identify, right, the word identity, you start to identify all of the things inside of you that you kind of stand upon, your values and virtues and convictions and what gives you goosebumps and things. Well, guess what? And this is to answer your question. Your why becomes your why, and
Mm.
not your mom or dad's, not your somebody you respect. You start to actually drill into what are the things that rise to the top for me. So that's kind of a I'll put a
Mhm.
there. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I agree with you 1000%. So every leader that's watching and listening right now, David is starting us off right, hitting the ground, right? It's really important that you understand you, why, how you are fashioned, the value that you bring, what you bring to the table, what comes with you in every room. This helps to guide who you are as a leader. So let me ask you this question, David. How does understanding who you are change the way we make decisions, the way because we're talking to leaders here, right? The way we lead others and the way that we build meaningful careers or missions. How does understanding who we are change these things?
Yeah. So I would say it's probably maybe the better language would be how does it inform, those things. And again, I do think that you're probably right. It changes them because quite often, we feel like we're off track, right, in certain points in life, and we feel this discordance with, the person that I kind of want to be that I might not even have a language for, or I might not even have the courage to pursue, by the way. And this idea that I'm feeling stuck or I'm feeling apathetic or avoidant. So yes, it does change, but I would say first and foremost, when we have some self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
it starts to inform our decisions. So again, it sounds a bit deep here, but I don't know any other way to go there. So what is it that makes up a who, right? When somebody says, who are you? Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's a variety of things that describe, someone's nature. So you can talk about physical attributes, which are very important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything from people can run faster or golf better or jump higher or, sing better, all that kind of thing, right? Um, and then also, what about values? So, we hear a lot, especially in the corporate, side of things, we hear, corporations talking about core values. Well, these are our core values. I'll be
Right.
honest, that's really important, but typically it's on the wall in the lobby as you walk by, and nobody ever, pays attention to them again because it's more marketing than it is actually an
Mm-hmm.
ethos on how we operate. But
Mercy.
but what if a person doesn't have a hierarchy of values, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if they are extrinsically motivated? What if they're into, and I've been there, by the way. What if you're people pleasing? What if you're fear based and you walk into a room and you're kind of reading the room thinking, how do I get by better in here, avoid less pain, or get more attaboys or applause? Like you're constantly looking for that external or extrinsic feedback, as opposed to you enter a room and the hierarchy of things that rise to the top for you, and you operate in that intrinsic capacity. So for instance, the values portion here probably is the most important. So I'll drill into this just a little bit. My buddy Dr. Andy Garrett and I, we coach individuals and corporations and stuff through all this identity work. And so here's what's fascinating. He says that the values, for instance, if you were to do a core values assessment, and he does this in such a way that is super, maybe the word is elementary. So you have a sheet of paper with, 80 or 90, core values, in the English language anyway, written on them. And if you have a room of 100 people, or so, and you kind of put a check mark next to the values that kind of resonate with you, and then you're asked, hey, let's narrow that down to 20. Now let's narrow that down to 10. Now let's narrow that down to 5. And you put those in order. Well, guess what? There's a hierarchy of things that rise to the top for you versus me. And everybody in that room is going to have, for the most part, a bit of a different set of top core values. It's not that we don't embody the rest of those, but there's certain things that seem to rise to the top for us. And if you couple that with, virtues, which is kind of this idea of an outward, type of an impact, that dent in the universe thing, versus convictions, right? What do you believe is right and wrong? Well, values, virtues, and convictions are different. And most people don't have a real clear understanding of those things that are super meaningful to them. But so now you've got, okay, what is it that makes a who, right? You've got all the physical attributes. You've got values, convictions, and virtues. And I got this from a Nissan commercial. What is it that gives your goosebumps? What is it that puts that lump in your throat in a good way? What is it that, how about this? My buddy Quentin Hafner wrote the book, Go Next Level. And he says some things that help you drill into your who you are is, what is it that breaks your heart? What is it that infuriates you? What is it, that lights you up? Like, what is it that just sets your heart on fire, right?
Yes.
Well, so some of these things are very, how about this? They're ordinary, meaning you can actually put words to them very quickly. Some of them need a narrative, right? Some of those things that describe our souls need a bit of a narrative. So if you couple all of those things together, you start to, how about this? You start to identify, right? The word identity, all the things that you identify with, as opposed to your mom or dad or brother or Joe Rogan or, somebody you might admire. It's you understand, this is who I am. This is what I love. This is what lights me up. And this is what doesn't. You get really clear on the doesn't even. And so the identity statement, I think it was, for heaven's sakes, who was it first that said people like us do things like this? Seth Godin, maybe. So I love that phrase, right? So to your listener, can you say with specific language, someone like me, I do things like this? It starts to shape your why then. Your why becomes your why, as opposed to just this kind of vague understanding of what works, what doesn't. I'm looking for kind of happiness and comfort, as opposed to, I'm David Osk, and I'm looking for mission and purpose and impact, so that when I see my unique shaped dent, right, in somebody else, I not only have the satisfaction that I moved someone, but I get to see it. I get the joy of seeing my impact in ultimately the way God made me, right? Because I didn't make me. And so he gets the glory, I get the joy, and we get to do it again and again. And it's just, it becomes fantastic.
Love it. I love it 1000%. And so to all of our listeners and watchers, leaders, listen, I'm asking you right now to go ahead in the chat and share with David and I what is resonating with you. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about identity. We're talking about clarity. What's resonating with you right now? Go ahead and share it, and I'll be sure to share it on a future episode. So, as you were talking, for me, I was thinking about this, and I want to share this with you. When we talk about knowing who we are, it brings clarity to decision making because, like you have been saying this whole time, when you know who you are, decisions become anchored in values rather than emotion, fear, or external pressure. And this is really important because I think this is a place where many leaders sometimes get tripped up in their leadership because they're operating not in their value system, but they're operating out of emotions, how I feel at the moment. I feel upset. I feel tense. I feel angry. I feel afraid. I'm going to respond based on that or external pressure. They're telling me I'm behind or I have to
Right.
meet this mark, as opposed to operating through their value system, right? Remembering honesty and integrity and compassion and all those things. So, to our leaders, we want to give you a leadership principle. Clear identity produces clear decisions, period.
And you know what? So I literally about a year ago thought about launching just a course on how to make better decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how many people would be like, oh my gosh, I have not only made bad decisions, I've doubled down on really horrible decisions. Why?
Yes.
And I mean, you start looking in the mirror over and over, and I've been there, by the way. Heck, every day or two, I make a stupid decision, and I have to course correct back to my values and what's really important here. But
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately, your life is built upon decision making. The decisions you make yesterday are going to inform today and next week and next month, and pretty soon, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm either grateful that I
Mm-hmm.
course corrected and made better decisions that built a more fulfilling and relationship driven life, or I get, a year or two down the road and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my fault, right? I blamed everyone around me and didn't do some of the deep work. And now all of a sudden I'm in the ditch and I don't know how to get out.
Mercy. So then let me ask you this, right? What do you see as the main obstacles for people finding success? What are the main obstacles?
Yeah. So, obviously, I think that when a lot of people think of success, they think of, money. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? I'll be honest, it's really important. I mean, I heard somebody say one time, money is like air. Try to live without it.
Mercy.
And here's the funny thing is if you're struggling financially, so you have personal and professional, let's just maybe just, kind of put the two camps out there. If
Mm-hmm.
you're struggling, on a professional level and you're worried about how to put food on the table, right? You're like, man, I'm not sure how to pay my rent next month or something like that. You know what? You're probably not in Mr. Or Mrs. Development mode, personal development mode. You're worried about making ends meet. So I think that success, although it is very holistic, right? If you don't have great relationships in your life and your family is falling apart, I mean, that's a tough one. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can't put food on the table and you're worried about where you're going to eat dog food when you're 70 years old because you didn't save for retirement, that's a tough one. So
Mm-hmm.
so I think that the precursor is it's kind of multifaceted. It's there's not just one little silver bullet, right? We are creatures who are um, made to be nurtured and loved. I often use this quote by Benjamin Disraeli, former PM of England back in the 1800s, and he says the greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own. And I'll be honest, I think that that yes, we can identify all of these things about ourselves, but
Mm-hmm.
unless someone comes along and loves us, i.e. our parents, right, and says, I see these things in you and I love what I see.
Mm-hmm.
We That's the fuel then that tends to galvanize and grow all of the really the things that we so long to want to believe that are true about ourselves. So I think that success, starts young. It starts with some vulnerability. It starts with some self-awareness. It starts with those around us, calling us up and calling us out and naming us and
Mm-hmm.
um, and saying those things like, what I see in you, I love. Like that's fantastic. I hope you do more of that. And I love your impact. Like we need to be watered, right? We need to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
So, but here's a funny thing too is um, I think that, quite often we don't realize as we get older that we become like the people we spend the most time with. Yes, when we're growing up, we need to be nurtured and loved and raised, right? Not just provided for. We need to be raised, which is caused to rise. But I also believe that when we get older, we need to have wonderful, life-giving people in our lives that continue to nurture us. We are by design those who need to, loan courage or borrow courage, right? Life is hard. And that's where we get the word encouragement. I mean, we were literally designed to give it, and we were designed to receive it. And because we live in a world at war, right? It's life is hard. It's brutal sometimes. So I think that first and foremost, success is, being surrounded by amazing people who love you and encourage you and lift you up.
I love that. I love that. Again, to our amazing community right now, I want to invite you to go ahead in the chat and share with us what is resonating from this conversation. This is one of those reflective conversations. This is where we get a chance to engage as community. So share with us right now in the chat, or you can send a DM if you're listening. What is resonating with you as David is sharing with us? David, I want to ask you this question, right? We're going to stick with this 3 number. What are the top 3 things that we need in our life to break through obstacles? You mentioned something earlier about life is tough. Everybody has something that they're working through in one or more areas of their life, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to the leaders that are listening and watching right now? What would you say are like the top 3 things that we need in our lives to break through the obstacles that we face?
Wow. You know what? I'm gonna kind of punch through a wall here. I think there's a big difference between someone who is feeling down or low, someone struggling, and someone who is humble. They're very different. So I would say the first one is humility. I think that quite often, my biggest problem is not anybody else, it's me. I'm not willing to look at someone else and say, and I think I'll just speak for men, right? I think men in general have a hard time saying, I have a need. I'm struggling and I don't know how to navigate what's happening inside of me. I have imposter syndrome and fear, and I'm feeling like I'm not enough and I'm ill-equipped. And the funny thing is we're right. It's right. You're probably way worse off than you think you are. But what? I look at this from a top-down, perspective. I think it might have been C.S. Lewis back in the day when he said, yeah, you're way worse off than you think you are, but you're way more loved and accepted, by God than you ever thought possible. So I think that humility is a chosen place, from a position of strength. It's standing on a firm ground and letting someone speak into your life. It starts because if I knew how to figure this out, I would. But I was designed to be needy, right? That's not a bad thing. I have needs. I have all that kind of stuff. So I need the older shall raise the younger. I need to stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before me. I need other people to speak into my life. In fact, sometimes I need somebody to call me out and say, hey, dude, the reason you're having a problem is because you can't get out of your own way, and you need to just be quiet and listen. So humility is really a wonderful place to accept, to see a new perspective, and to be like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be pretending anymore. So I think the second one would be some self-awareness, like, understanding, whose you are and who you are, and on a very granular level. And then I think number 3 would be, just surround yourself with people. I'm going to butcher this quote, but for some reason I woke up thinking about it. It might have been John Eldridge, where he says, surround yourself with like-minded kings and then sign alliances with them. And I just think, man, there's a big difference between a king or queen mentality, right? Like where you see, my kingdom with a little K is everything that I can see, I can touch. And I've been commanded to have dominion over that, to have kind of a weird word there, right? As opposed to what? I am an imposter. I'm a nobody. I'm
Mm,
I don't belong, and I'm going to fake it until I make it. Are you
mm,
kidding me?
mhm.
That's not who we are. So I think
Yes.
that humility, I think some self-awareness on who I am and who I'm not and how God made me is second. And then surround yourself with like-minded kings, right?
Mm,
People who are good and noble, who have a growth mindset, who want to lift others up, and they're not threatened by competition or all the nonsense the world is throwing at us.
I love that. I love that. I love this. This is an amazing conversation. And to everyone that's listening and watching again, I'm going to invite you to do like me and go back and watch this again or listen to this again. This is one of those replay conversations because David is spitting out the gems right now. And we really need to take this in so that we can change and enhance our leadership. As we turn the corner on this conversation, I want to ask you this question because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, David, that there are leaders that are listening and watching that have more questions, but not just necessarily a question for you, for themselves. They're
Yeah.
still feeling just a little unclear. So, for the leader that is listening who feels unclear about their identity or they're unclear about their direction, what is one practical step that this leader can take this week to start with who and lead from a stronger foundation?
Yeah. So how about this? I'll tee it up this way. When I'm writing a book for dads called The Guardians of Grit, and I asked my buddy Dr. Andy Garrett, I said, "What's the number one job of a father?" So this will speak to what you're saying here. It's not what I expected. You know what he said? The
Well,
number one job of a dad is to remove as much uncertainty as possible.
mm,
I was like, what is that? Like, really? What? Well, the more you read into it, right? Well, what does a son or a daughter need? They need to know dad he's got my back, right? He's protecting me. He loves me. I am the object of his delight. He
mhm,
is never leaving. He like just a ton of certainty. So I think that in a leader needs to start removing uncertainty in your own heart and mind, and that starts with values. That
mm,
starts with what we talk about core values. What does your core, right? What does your soul happen to value most of all in this life? And
mhm,
I mean, again, we walk people through all that. So I would say that removing uncertainty is absolutely the goal. I mean, you need to understand, man, this is the bedrock I'm standing on. This is the lens at which I'm making decisions through. And
mhm,
when we don't, and we will every day, by the way, right? There's no utopia here. I'm going to make poor decisions today. But what?
mhm.
I'm going to course correct. But if I
Yes.
don't know what I'm course correcting to, I'm going to go from one ditch to the other.
Mhm,
I need to know what that plumb line looks like, and I need to have a description on it so that when I say my core values are, God, inspiration, wisdom, community, and impact, and
mhm,
actually I threw beauty in there, number six. But it's if it's not that, if it doesn't revolve around those words, well, I better tap the brakes at
mm.
the
That's
very
it.
least. So I
Mhm,
think removing uncertainty, that seems a little bit, woo-hoo kind of language, but I think it's quite practical.
mhm. I love that. But listen, this has been a gem of a conversation to everyone that is listening and watching. We're going to ask David right now, David, if there are, not if, there are leaders that want to find out more and hear more about this, what's the best way to move forward in engagement with you?
Yeah, so I'll be launching a new website, but right now and you were so kind to mention my music. I'm so grateful to. I live in Nashville and I get to sing at a pretty high level still, and I so enjoy that. But right now my main site is David Ask. It's ASK. It's spelled like ask. DavidAskmusic.com, and just send me a message there. If I can help you in any way, I will do my best.
I love it. Transformation Station, we like to support our guests. So you see the link on the screen. It's also in the description box. Please go ahead, check the link, look at the resources, reach out to David and let David know that you have seen, that you have heard this particular episode. Let him know what has resonated with you and ask more questions because we know the community that learns together grows together. David, it's been wonderful to have you with us today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, today's conversation reminded all of us that leadership clarity begins within. When we as leaders are grounded in who we are, we lead with greater confidence, consistency, and impact. And if this episode encouraged you, then I want to invite you right now to take time this week to reflect on the identity and the values shaping your leadership. As always, be sure to subscribe to Transformation Station Leadership Podcast. Share this episode with someone you know who is committed to growing as a leader and continue building leadership. Listen, until next time, I want you to remember leadership does not begin with what you do, it begins with who you are.